Hi, this is George Katouf for AgelessTimelesss.com, where we try to answer the question, what do you expect for someone my age? Our response, excellence. We try to interview individuals over the age of 50 or those that contribute to the individuals over the age of 50 to ensure that we're doing everything possible to maximize our health potential. Because remember, your body is a temple. Okay, welcome today to Ageless Timeless. This is the program that tries to encourage people to stay healthy and vital throughout their life. There are those that suggest that the concept of illness and old age is not normal, that we should go through life till we leave this earth and feel good and vibrant. And today I have an amazing individual who has taken a path that is totally distinct from most of his colleagues. He is a physician, was a police officer, was an attorney, was a prosecutor. I know this is hard to believe that someone could have all these careers. And also an emergency room physician, but an award-winning one in the military. And now he spends his time not only taking care of himself, but people worldwide to try to do exactly what we talk about, and that is good health throughout life. So it's Dr. Shauna Mera. I don't know if you want to expound on anything I mentioned about your careers, because many people are going to find it hard to believe that someone could do all these things.
Yeah. Well, you know, I just was kind of restless all along, and I would see another career or something else that, you know, I would be attracted to, and I would see it as an improvement in my situation, and so I would just do it. There were always challenges and obstacles to starting a career, but I would surmount those obstacles and do what I had to do. The ends were so important to me that I would endure means. So one thing I would add that is kind of interesting is, you know, having been, you know, a police officer and a criminal prosecutor and attorney, I want to go to medical school. And my mindset, go to medical school. I studied, there are a lot of lawyers that kind of want to do it. Other people, lots of people want to go to medical school. Not as many make it there. But one of the things I observed is that in my colleagues, attorneys, who would start to try to go to medical school, and very often they'd have to go to college, go back to take sciences like I did. I didn't take sciences when I was in college, so I had to take science classes to be able to qualify for, you know, medical school to attend it. And to do that, you got to study, and you can't do lousy. You got to nail it. You got to get straight A's to get into medical school. And my colleagues in law that tried it, they kept practicing law because it pays good money, and so they keep practicing law, and they didn't have enough time to study and nail it. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to leave law. So I had to walk away from it. That was a big ask, you know, to walk away from my legal profession. And I not only walked away, I had to do something else to cover my room and board, because I still had to feed myself. I was unmarried. I was about 27 at the time. And I took a job as a security guard. Now that's a step down from being a police officer, and quite a few step downs from being a criminal prosecuting attorney. Put on a polyester uniform with a little shiny tin badge and cap and, you know, little uniform. And I worked as a night watchman, and I sat there all night long studying all my college degrees. And yeah, it helped a modestly intelligent guy get straight A's and do well enough on my medical school aptitude test to get into medical school. So yeah, I share that because, you know, when you figure out what you got to do something, it's the personality, you know, behind that analysis to do it, and then also to invest in whatever it takes to do that. So when it comes to health, I'll just segue into it. most people aren't willing to put in what is necessary to optimize their health. Either they fail to analyze or learn what's really required, or something holds them back. But let me tell you, you're being lied to, because what I put into my health effort, it might be a lot of things, but it is a way, in the long run, a shortcut on life that I feel like I'm cheating life. And if you're listening today and you don't believe in ageless living, you're struggling and you're suffering unnecessarily, and you're working way more than Sean and George are, particularly if you're overweight. You just walk across, 100 feet, and you may have worked harder than I did all day, carrying that kind of weight around with you. So, it's understanding that you can do a lot in an intelligent way to live better. And so I love your show, that you're helping people to understand that information, and you're presenting it in a way, George, that's deeply attractive.
Well, I appreciate that. I disagree with one thing you said. You have to have extreme brain matter to do what you've done. Having said that, you weren't always the healthiest guy in the world. So I think it's important for everyone to know that at one juncture, you might have been quite unhealthy. Could you extrapolate on that a bit?
Yeah. So, I might have done a lot of interesting jobs and done, some cool stuff before I finally got myself healthy. But, I went to medical school. I got a scholarship through the Army to pay for that. And then I had to do my time in the Army. And when I was an emergency medicine physician, I actually had gotten out of the Army at that point. And during, the 16 years or so of being a physician, ER physician, I was following the dietary strategies I learned in medical school, which was to avoid fat. And so I drank skim milk, filled myself up with skim milk, loaded with either chocolate syrup or chocolate powder, filled with sugar, because that was okay. I mean, that's fine. Carbohydrates are good. Fat is the demon. And I ate lots of pasta. I put sugar in I called it Sean O'Mara spaghetti sauce, and I put sugar in it. My God, I was insane, drinking gallons of orange juice, and I had lots of healthy cereals, get my 6-8 grain servings of cereal a day. I had giant, enormous boxes of cereal. So yeah, I ate a lot of unhealthy stuff and tons of rice and pasta. And so I got fat. And then disease set in. And you don't have a good barometer, like a light switch, warning, Will Robinson, you've got disease, it just slowly ensues in you. And there I am, this heavyset guy, and I'm in front of a young patient. And we're talking about weight gain, and he's not heavy. And he says, you need to cut out carbohydrates and eat this diet called the paleo diet. So this was back in 2009. The paleo diet was kind of just getting started. And so I didn't know anything about it. I said, what's the paleo diet? And he told me it's, kind of an ancestral diet, how we used to eat, and didn't eat processed foods and cut out carbohydrates. And we ate basically healthy meat and protein and fat. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I read about it and immediately made sense. So I started doing it. And at that time, I did it to lose weight. At that time, I had an enlarged prostate so bad that when I would pee, it would fall out of me. It would dribble. There was no stream. There was no sense of shooting it anymore. There was hardly a noise except for just dribbling in the toilet. And it was an investment in time. It took a long time for me to pee. And if you're listening and you got an enlarged prostate, you know what I'm talking about. And if you're young and you're listening to this, you already know not to get behind when you go see some sports, competition at a large arena or football field, not to get behind old guys with gray hair, because you're going to be in that line a long time, because they're just going to take a long time to pee. So I had a large prostate. I had erectile dysfunction. I had eczema all over my body. I had restless leg syndrome where I kicked my legs all night long. I had sleep apnea where I'd snore all night long. I had atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, so clogged arteries. And I had severe heartburn where I was on 3 medications at one time to try to stop my heartburn. And I had precancerous lesions in my esophagus. So I had to endure biopsies of my esophagus every 3 months for my entire life to try to watch for cancer when those metaplastic changes occurred, from being precancerous to actually becoming cancerous. And what a stressful time. I'm waiting for me to get cancer, and I had to keep doing these biopsies. And the insanity of my existence, all this medication. And then I do this diet, this low carb paleo diet to lose weight. I didn't know anything about anything else. And my objective was one thing: to lose weight, stop being this fat guy that I was. And not only did I lose weight, which was nice, but I remember standing in my master bathroom, and peeing, and it was shooting out of me finally. And it didn't happen overnight. It just slowly, as slow as it came on, my bad peeing, the good peeing slowly came on, and I finally remembered that now I'm back to, I don't pee like I used to, and it's shooting down. And it sounds hard and effective, my stream. And then I started thinking, I said, well, is my urination improving? And then I realized, my God, I'm not waking up 4 to 5 times a night to pee anymore. I said, I'm sleeping through the night. And, you might think I was super happy, like, wow, that's great. And, I'm like happy. Well, that's the average person, not me. I was a doctor who went to medical school, and I realized I was lied to. I realized everything. I felt like my world was rocked, and that everything I believed in wasn't true. And I was confronted with the reality that if I just changed my life, all these disease processes went away. My restless leg, kicking my legs at night, my snoring, my erectile dysfunction. No more taking Viagra and Cialis. I could pee back like I used to be able to pee. My eczema reversed. So yeah, if I wasn't a physician, I'd have been happy. But now I felt like I was a con artist. And I felt like I was part of an enormous con scheme going on in medical school where we just pushed medicines. And now I got a new purpose in life. I had to figure out how the heck did this dietary change reverse all this disease. So I became a researcher and studied for the National Science Foundation. And so as a consequence, I began researching what do you have to do to reverse chronic disease. I wanted to document the things that I did and research it because nobody else was doing it. And I'm like, somebody's got to do this. So I left my high-paying emergency medicine job, took a zero-income research job, and then I worked part-time in an urgent care to make enough money to get electric bills and house my family. So I did part-time work in an urgent care and did my research. And so I studied, with my research partner, different biomarkers inside the body and later outside the body that were associated with the reversal of chronic disease. And we did this for 7 years. We were funded by the National Science Foundation. So I'd love to share with you and your audience what those things are that we learned you got to track to really optimize you, and what really ultimately what worked for me, what caused all my disease process to get better, were confirmed in 6,000 people that we studied. That when we looked at them, all of their chronic disease either got better or went completely away when they followed these biomarkers and did these strategies. unlike the masses of people, millions of people, and at least in America and billions around the globe, listening to their doctors that just take medicine, and let's be honest, you just continue to get worse. You think 30 years from now, if you keep up that plan, going to that doctor and taking those medicines, that you're going to be in a better situation 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road? You're not. So I'd like to share with you now, George, and your audience, what we found out through natural strategies that really mimic and mirror what happened with me in my own experience. And we've got a lot more. I've figured out a lot more than just diet now. So I'll start with your permission. I'll cover this right here. I'm going to show you scan through an abdomen. Okay, so if we scan through the abdomen of a person, we create an image like this by MRI. And an MRI, visceral fat any fat shows up as white. So visceral fat is this white stuff in the middle of that scan. And that scan is it's bouncing. I got to stop sitting on this thing because I'm bouncing my supplier. That white stuff is visceral fat, and the dark stuff are muscles. So when it comes to an MRI scan of your abdomen, you want to be more dark and less white. That's what I tell people. And so an MRI scan reveals this substance called visceral fat, which is highly inflammatory. And as it turns out, it secretes all these inflammatory molecules 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, constantly spewing out these inflammatory substances. And so it is, in my opinion, the single most important biomarker of disease that you can find in your body, because nothing improves human beings more than when you eliminate it, nothing else. But almost no doctor will tell you about it because no doctor knows about it. Well, in medical school, I had to learn about it in a research practice from my research partner who told me about it. I didn't know about it. And so you can find it by getting an MRI and take a look at it. And yeah, you hear MRI, you're thinking money. Well, yeah, you got to spend some money. You're spending a lot of money to get worse disease. Why not spend a little money to get better? So that's why I get people. I talk them into getting an MRI scan and see this visceral fat inside of them. So in the top image, we painted that visceral fat red, and we paint the subcutaneous fat yellow so you can tell the difference. And then when
so just to stop you a moment, Dr. O'Mara, because many people don't understand the distinction between visceral fat and subcutaneous fat. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so subcutaneous fat, and I'll go back to that scan, is on the outside of the body. So it's the yellow stuff, and it's the inch kind of variety of fat on the outside. And the subcutaneous fat you can't feel. That's the fat that's deep inside your abdomen. And so subcutaneous fat, as it turns out, is protective. It helps protect you against cardiovascular disease. So it actually helps you to, I feel like I'm bending over. I'm just going to adjust my camera here a little bit more so that we can get a better look at that screen. And I'm not bending over so much, and you don't see my face all contorted. Is that better? I think it is.
That's good. Very good.
Yeah. So subcutaneous fat is protective against that disease. It actually, particularly a type of subcutaneous fat called superficial subcutaneous fat. So it's a thin layer of fat that you want on your abdomen because it releases a molecule called adiponectin. adiponectin, just like it sounds, adiponectin. And adiponectin reduces your mortality from cardiovascular disease, and it improves your quality of life, and it reduces fatty liver disease and fat within your organs. So you want more of that stuff. You want a thin layer of subcutaneous fat. There's probably, it's like most things, it's Goldilocks. You want just the right amount, but not too much. You don't want to have a huge, enormous, you want to look like the Michelin tire man, we got too much fat around you. But you also don't want to look like the bodybuilder that has no subcutaneous fat, because they're missing out on that protective benefit. And for sure, you don't want that visceral fat deep inside of your abdomen, causing all the release of inflammatory molecules that get released from that. And then we'll show you some other pictures of some other type of bad fat. But hopefully that helps explain the difference for your audience, the differences where that fat is, the different type of fat, and the differences from a biochemical standpoint, how one causes harm and the other one prevents it. So I like to tell people, show them examples. You got to know what's good and bad. You know why? Because if you get an MRI scan, you're going to have to read it yourself, because your doctor is not going to read it. The radiologist isn't going to read it either. You got to read it. So you want to be mostly dark. This is my friend. His name is Gabe. He's in the Army National Guard with me. He's got enormous muscles. He's mostly muscles inside his abdomen. And he's got a six-pack. You can see that nice oval shape. And if you're listening today, that's probably how your abdomen looked. You had an oval-shaped abdomen when you were like 16, 18, 20 years old. And then, if you're listening today, you probably got a belly sticking out because of the influence of visceral fat destroying that abdomen. It's very insidious. It happens over a period of time. So Gabe's abdomen is very different looking from another friend who's Asif. And Asif is filled with visceral fat inside of him. When you look at his scan, it's mostly white and very little dark. His muscles are very small because he's got sarcopenia. So visceral fat contributes to loss of muscle tissue. As you accumulate visceral fat, your muscles start shrinking from the inflammatory influence and the disease associated with visceral fat. It causes this terrible scourge affecting America that not enough people are aware of and talking about, and that's sarcopenia, or medical frailty, or you become a non-vigorous, frail human being that starts shrinking, losing their muscles and their performance. And then you can't get your butt out of a chair. You can't sit up from a chair without help. And so sarcopenia is bad, and you can be both sarcopenic, where you're losing muscle, and obese. So sarcopenic obesity is the double whammy. It's the worst of all, getting a combination of loss of muscle and accumulation of bad fat. So another example of good and bad that's really important for your audience to be aware of is this one here, lots of white. And again, the small muscles we see in this individual scan here. But look at the association of another bad henchman that shows up. And it's the fat, these white streaks. Remember, fat shows up as white on an MRI. When you do MRIs of your legs, you can also see disease in your muscle. And this muscle here is all this white streaks is called myosteatosis, myosteatosis, myosteatosis. The other term for that is adverse muscle composition. So the composition of muscle is turning adverse. And the layman's term I like to tell you that is human muscle marbling. So we all know muscles, muscle marbling in steaks, the marbling of steaks. That's what's happening in a cow, but it's also happening in you if you got visceral fat inside of you and you're living incorrectly. So you don't want legs like that. You want legs like this guy here. He has no fat in his legs, very big, huge, giant muscles, and really good shape. But look at the association of his abdomen. Same thing. He has no visceral fat. His visceral fat is that tiny little triangle there. And he has this enormous, very, very lean muscle. No fat within his muscle of his abdomen, no fat within his muscles of his legs. So the take-home point for this scan is the amount of visceral fat you have defines the amount of fat that you're going to have, inflammatory fat, in your muscles. and basically how much disease you're going to have in your body. And yet nobody's telling you about visceral fat. So you get a scan and you learn it.
With visceral fat, so we can clarify, could you be a very thin person and still have a significant amount of visceral fat?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. In fact, that's the situation of this guy right here. He has a 32-inch waist, which was the same size as my waist, and he had very little sub-Q fat, just a little bit around him. He was mostly visceral fat inside. So we have a name for these people. They're often called skinny fat or TOFI, thin outside, fat inside. Thin outside, fat inside. TOFI. The other term for visceral fat is invisible obesity. You can be a lean person and think you don't have any visceral fat, and you're filled with it inside. And so that is a reality for a lot of people. And the sad part about that situation is they're actually more at risk for mortality and bad outcome than a person that is fat outside also. So the extra fat outside, probably because of, again, adiponectin protects them more. But when they have reduced fat outside and more fat inside, that inverse relationship, then you're more at risk. So basically, you want more fat outside and thin inside. So that's a FODI, fat outside, thin inside. That's what you want. And most people, sadly, not most people are not TOFIs, but the people that are TOFI, they're more at risk. So that's
also to one more question in terms of visceral fat. So the audience understands it's not just within the abdominal region. That's where you're taking the MRI. It could be engulfed in any organ of the body. Is that correct?
Yeah, visceral means organ. So visceral fat typically is around the majority of the organs within the abdominal thoracic region. So visceral fat would also cover fat around your pancreas, your liver, your gallbladder, and even your heart is an organ. So fat accumulates around the heart. So yeah, these fat depots where fat resides is important to know. We come at it, we treat all fat the same, and it's not. There's actually good fat, which I talked about, the adiponectin. Another good beneficial fat, or adiponectin is a molecule with a good fat, superficial subcutaneous fat. Sorry, I misspoke there. The other good kind of beneficial fat is brown fat, brown adipose tissue, which is rich in mitochondria and associated with increased levels of energy, ATP production, and it's beneficial. So those are two good types of fat, and the bad fat is the visceral fat. We've talked about it, and then myosteatosis in your musculature, and this is a marbleized steak here. You can see that, and this steak here on right here is 100% grass-fed, grass-finished steak. And what's interesting, nobody talks about this, and I didn't know this until about 2 months ago when I had a client come to me, a client patient who is a veterinarian, and he wants to become optimally healthy. So that's what I do. I practice today optimize health and performance optimization, or the biological optimization of humans. So I don't help you lose weight. I help you become biologically optimal, which might include losing weight, but my objective is to get you as healthy as possible. So he shared with me something profound. He was basically a veterinarian who took care of a lot of farm animals. And he let me know that this is how he made his money, off grain-fed cows. He didn't even get called for the grass-fed ones. Grass-fed ones don't get sick. They don't have problems. It's when you feed them a high carbohydrate diet, cows, that they get disease. Huh? Does that sound familiar to anybody listening?
Yes.
That's the story in a nutshell with diseased humans. We're feeding them the wrong thing, And we're also, there's the other part of this is grass-fed cows are outdoors. They're walking around. They're in the sunshine. They're happy. They're frolicking around. These guys are oftentimes in confined operations, confined animal feeding operations in a pen, and they're confined, and they're not walking around. They're not in sunshine, and they're miserable, and they're getting disease. So how you live, what you eat, dictates the amount of disease you get, and whether you're going to a doctor. You eat healthy. I haven't been to a doctor. I hadn't need to go to a doctor in years since I've been healthy, and not needed one. And that's how humans should be, living, without the need for medicine or having to go to a doctor. Now, it's not to say doctors don't have a place. If I get in a car wreck, I'm not going to go home and try to eat healthy meat. I'm going to head to the hospital to get emergent treatment. But if I've got a chronic disease, I'm not going to go listen to some doctor who he or she is filled with chronic disease themselves and getting as worse as I am, and tell me to take these pills. No, I'm going to change my life to eradicate that disease. So that's how I practice today.
Great.
So here's some other scans. This is a 40-year-old, a 74-year-old who's mostly fat. They got fat in their muscle, and see how small their muscles are in the middle. And then this is a healthy 74-year-old who's an athlete and eats healthy. They don't have any of that. They're like the other guy with the huge muscles, who, by the way, was an Olympic sprinter. So, athleticism, working out, exercise has a role in helping the body to be healthy, but it's not the only story. And then this person is sedentary and eats a terrible healthy diet, and their muscles are falling apart. So it's important to get those scans. Here's an interesting one I like to cover too, is a marathon. So this person does a lot. They're very athletic. They do 8 to 10 marathons a year, but look at the amount of redness that they have inside them. That's all visceral fat. And they have very little yellow stuff on the outside. So they're a TOFI, thin outside, fat inside. They don't have the protective benefit of adiponectin. They have the influence of inflammation throughout their body from that visceral fat. And so this person saw that, and they changed on a dime, gave up distance running and became a sprinter. And within 3 months, eradicated 50% of that visceral fat by adopting a sprinting lifestyle instead of distance running. So one of the things we find is distance durational exercise. Too much exercise is associated with either visceral fat causing visceral fat, or what I think it in large part does, actually, George, is it makes visceral fat refractory. And so even if you're eating healthy, like not eating processed foods, and you're eating clean, but you're doing a lot of distance running or distance cycling, don't get mad at me if you go and do these 200, 100-mile bike races. You're out doing all this bicycling. I'm just telling you, it's associated by MRI with a lot of visceral fat, and they're very often TOFIs. The bicyclists, the rowers, and joggers, runners have this invisible obesity inside. The other clever name for it that I like, that Carl Lenore, a superhuman radio, came up. You kind of remind me of Carl if you don't know him. He's an interesting guy. He calls it radioactive fat. It's fat inside your body that causes all these problems. So yeah, if you're a distance durational exercise athlete and you're serious, for God's sakes, get an MRI and see if you got invisible obesity inside of you. Do you have this deadly, inflammatory fat inside of you that's causing problems? Now, this guy's in really bad shape, huge amount, mostly white, very little dark. I like to put this scan up here because when this guy got scanned, I showed him good scans and bad scans. And when I pulled up his scan, this guy flat out passed out, went completely unconscious from a standing position, hit the ground. He fainted because he was so upset. Now, you're watching this show and maybe you're starting to get a little interested and kind of interesting. Well, let me tell you, If you scan yourself and you saw you had this much fat inside of you and you knew that that was bad, you'd be very, very upset. And so I see, I hear a lot of colorful language coming out of my clients, my patients, when they show up and they get their scans, because they had no idea how much visceral fat they had in them. And it's very moving. And, you know, after being a doctor for almost 30 years, I never hear colorful language coming out of their mouths when I show them lab reports or numbers. You got to see this disease. It's the disease that you can see that really bothers you. So that's why I like getting MRIs, because I help people process this information sensorially, engage in their senses. And you don't engage your senses when you look at a cholesterol panel and some doctor's telling you your LDL is going way up, or, you know, whatever, some other lab value. So I like MRIs. Now, this is probably my favorite slide of the whole my talk that I give here, is because it shows what happens when you just do one thing, which is probably the most important thing. What is it? If you're wondering, what is the most important thing to get rid of visceral fat? Stop eating processed foods. Processed foods has this enormous contribution to visceral fat. We see it time and time again. But this one series of MRI scans that we do over 35 weeks in a 68-year-old guy really hits this point home. And this 68-year-old guy only did one thing. He did not exercise 1 minute. All he did was he eliminated processed foods, cut out processed carbohydrates, processed foods from his diet. He just ate meat and vegetables in whole form. And he had all this visceral fat in the center. He had these big red streaks of fat within his musculature. That's the myosteatosis, the muscle fat we showed before. And then from here to here, you can see, if you're watching today, listening to Ageless, Timeless Living, that visceral fat reduced in just 2 weeks. But over the course of 35 weeks, the guy goes from a dad bod here, you know, with the belly sticking out, to a body like a 20-year-old collegiate athlete. He gets a six-pack. He's 68 years old, and he does it without exercising 1 minute, just cutting out processed foods. So if you only remember one thing from this whole talk from Sean O'Meara, you want to cut out that processed foods because of its enormous contribution to visceral fat. And when you decide to do that, how much visceral fat leaves your body and rewards you with this nice looking college-like body. This dude at 68 likes, when he takes his shirt off, that he looks more like a collegiate athlete. And oh, by the way, he's living like one too. It's not that you just look good, but when you get rid of that visceral fat, the one take-home point, the thing that shocked me the most, the very most about our research for the National Science Foundation in that 7 years was, yeah, the disease leaves, that's incredible, but it's the fact that humans perform better. I never could conceive that concept in medical school. What? Perform better? You know, what does that mean? Across the board, everything they get better, no matter what they did, got better if they got rid of this visceral fat. And so if what you do is important to you, and I hope it is, then getting rid of that visceral fat will allow you to be better at that and everything else. I'm telling you, you'll get better at ping pong, climbing ropes, sprinting, swimming, playing chess, hanging drywall, whatever it is that you do, you're going to improve it in every area of your life by getting rid of that visceral fat. So you ever heard that about cholesterol? No. The reason is because you don't get better. Think about this. Ever had one person, know anybody, who said, my doctor got my cholesterol under control and I've now got it all down. I'm taking all this medicine and it changed my life? No, you don't hear that because it doesn't happen. I'm telling you, if you're listening today, you get rid of your visceral fat and you're going to change your life. So that slide is there to show you how much carbohydrates and processed foods play in it. Well, what else can you do? Here's a cool one. Sprinting. I mentioned sprinting a couple times. This guy was a distance runner. he was filled with all this visceral fat. And he started to do our protocol for the National Science Foundation. And this is the repeat scan, and it's no better. Wait a minute, no better. You do my protocol, you got to get better. I mean, this gets rid of visceral fat. How come he's not getting better? Well, as it turns out, we want to make sure he's not cheating. You know, are you eating processed foods? No. Are you drinking alcohol? So alcohol will impair your body's ability to get rid of visceral fat, and it will increase your visceral fat as well. So he assured me he wasn't doing it, wasn't drinking. How about stress? Stress will increase your visceral fat and impair your ability to eliminate visceral fat, and through cortisol. And he assured me, nope, I don't have any stress in my life. Everything is good, hunky dory, no stress. And then the fourth thing I asked was impaired sleep. So sleep causes visceral fat accumulation in the abdomen and impairs the body's ability to get rid of it. And he assured me, no, I'm sleeping great. So finally, the fifth thing I asked him, I said, are you doing some sort of durational exercise? You did stop running, right? Because he was running 10 miles a day, 5 times a week. So he's putting in 50 miles a week. And he hung his head down, looked away from me. He said, no, I'm still running. And I'm like, well, that's it. We're going to kick you out, because you can't be in this study if you keep doing distance running, because we're not going to see any results. And we're trying to study and get results. So he promised he would quit. And so finally he did. He stopped running and he started sprinting. So the only change between these photographs, which are 2 months in a period of time, the only change was he cut out running, distance running, and he started sprinting. And now we see the other series was showing what happens when you cut out, when you just cut out processed foods and nothing else. Now I'm going to show you what happens when you cut out distance running and you just sprint. Just this one change. And this guy went from all this visceral fat to almost none. And he also got a 6-pack in less than 2 months. It's phenomenal. So sprinting has an amazing ability to eliminate visceral fat, help you eliminate it. So you don't want to do distance running, you want to do sprinting. That's the take-home lesson of this particular slide. Now, let's look at what the sprinter looks like. The guy who got rid of he had no visceral fat and had the enormous muscles and had no fat in his muscles. He's an Olympic sprinter. And so sprinting has this capacity through production of myokines and another molecule called lactate. It produces this messaging molecule that goes around and tells your other muscles in different areas to build tissue. So it actually gets released mostly in your large muscles of your lower extremities. So when he's sprinting, but you build these muscles. So I always tell my clients, hey, when you start sprinting, after you finish, feel your muscles before and after, and you'll see your arm muscles are filled with blood. Your chest muscles are filled with blood. And that's because, sprinting is so beneficial for your entire body. But a little word of caution, if you're older, 40, 50, 60 years of age, or even maybe in your 30s, you got to accelerate extremely, very, 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 very slowly. I'm at the point of don't even sprint. I've heard so many older people going out there trying to tear it up. They accelerate too fast and then they get a hamstring pull. And some of these are very serious. This week, Kevin Hart, the comedian, he tore his abdomen sprinting. So yeah, you are filled with disease. Kevin doesn't want to hear this, but that dude, if he got scanned, and I know he did because he tore his abdomen, he's filled with visceral fat. And that's what causes your muscles to tear and to get strained and to get these injuries. Visceral fat is causing you to fall apart. And that's why you could sprint when you were 20, a teenager, a kid. You didn't have it and you didn't get these kind of injuries. But now you're older. So get rid of your visceral fat and accelerate extremely slow. This is how it should look like. There should be no sense of any kind of phase in your running where you accelerate at one time. It should be a very, very slow, steady increase in that speed. So I tell people, take their time to slowly accelerate, make sure you're warmed up to avoid those injuries. So a little safety caution about sprinting. Well, another type of fat is fat around the heart. So we call that cardio fat, short for cardiac. And it's fat shows up as white. So it's this big area of white around the heart, which is in the middle of your lungs, your right and left lung fields. Center mass is your heart. And this guy's got a huge amount of fat around his heart. And he's the guy that cut out processed foods, but wouldn't exercise 1 minute. So we scanned his heart at the same time and look at the reduction of his heart, how much that reduced in just 13 weeks. It wasn't the 35 weeks. We saw that in 13 weeks.
That's amazing.
So not only get rid of visceral fat, but get rid of that highly inflammatory fat surrounding your heart. And so that's another slide I like to show people about how much your body heals throughout your body, not just your muscles, not just within your abdomen, your visceral fat, but around your organs. It's a consistent story when you get rid of that visceral fat, how much it helps all over. Well, let's kind of hit home the point of visceral fat with cardiac fat. We were doing slices like a pizza slice through the abdomen this way. What if we did a slice up and down, and what we call a sagittal slice? So here we have a sagittal slice going through the abdomen. This is where the feet are. This is the head. This is the kidney. This is the rectum, and this is the liver, and this is all this white surrounding all those organs is visceral fat. And right above the liver is the heart. And look what's swelling surrounding that heart is that big chunk of cardiac fat, or fat within the medium sternum right around that heart, highly inflammatory surrounding that heart. And so you can see the association, how much heart fat is with visceral fat. So visceral fat is really, really a bad player. And then this is my favorite slide. This is the most important one. Pay attention, because there's something for everybody here. This one is about brain arteries. And I've seen all manner of disease as an ER doctor, all kind of trauma and stuff. And I've decided the one manner of death I don't want to have, type of disease I don't want to have. I don't want anything to kill me, but the worst one is, in my opinion, strokes. Because I like thinking about things. I like studying and researching and talking to people. And if you have a stroke, that may all end for you. You may end up in a nursing home. And, by the way, nursing homes are all over in America filled with stroke patients. Go in there, talk to them, and the majority of people will be in there with strokes, because it's the #1 disease that kills people is heart attacks and strokes, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. So, I don't want to be laying in some nursing home, not being able to talk, or maybe not being able to understand speech when my wife comes to tell me she loves me, and I have no idea what she's saying. I mean, that is just not what I want to have happen to me. So I want to avoid it. Every human listening to this show, Ageless show right now, should have a profound awareness of what their stroke prevention plan is, how they're going to prevent this from happening, because chances are it's going to happen to you. You're going to go out from either a heart attack or stroke, and if you're not thinking how you're going to prevent that, you're already behind the curve. So I hope these slides are helping you start thinking about it, and keep listening to Ageless and what George is talking about, and you avoid it. So here are the brain arteries. These arteries come up, and you got them. Everybody has these arteries, and we can scan them. And then in this particular artery here, it's the dark is good, and right here there's a plaque, and the blood flow is diminished right there. It gets a little hazy. Hopefully you can see that. It's lighter. And then on this side, the blood flow is so bad that you can't even see it there. And that's a big lesion, has replaced that blood flow. And so we put this guy on the protocol that we developed from the National Science Foundation. And in just 9 months, we opened up this artery and we opened up this artery. So it wasn't a stroke, because it wasn't a complete cessation of blood flow, which results in ischemia, or loss of blood flow to tissue, and the tissue dies. He had just a slow diminishment because that plaque was forming, but we reversed that plaque. And that's super exciting to reverse that in 9 months. And so we only started doing that now because we figured we're going to open up blood flow. We had no idea what was going to happen when you got rid of visceral fat. But patients kept telling us, subjects in our study, my memory's better. Why is my memory better when I lose visceral fat? Why do I become more intelligent when I lose visceral fat? Why can I do my work better with fewer errors when I lose visceral fat? And so finally we started scanning brains to try to figure it out. And lo and behold, we saw that people had these arterial blockages, and that they would be reversed when they lost visceral fat. So don't you, if you're listening today, wouldn't you like to know if you have clogged arteries, and wouldn't you like to know how to open them up? And so really the answer is getting rid of that visceral fat is the short answer. And then what we observed besides that by MRI, we started tracking things outside the body. And so what we saw happening was people started getting these visible pulses. And I'll be honest, the first person was me. I'm like seeing my pulses. First thing happened is I crossed my knees, my legs, and I noticed this bounce in my leg. My leg was crossed. And I'm like, why is my leg bouncing? And I'm looking, God, it's bouncing to my heart rate. And I'm like, that's kind of cool, somehow. And I just write it off like, oh, well. But it kept getting bigger and bigger. And next thing I know, I started seeing my pulses. And I thought it was funny that I never saw that leg bounce before. I didn't realize it was because my arteries were opening up that my leg started to bounce when I crossed it. Next thing I saw is my pulses started to become visible. I didn't have to go feel my pulses. I used to spend all this time feeling my pulses track my heart rate. Now I could just look at it, and I didn't have to feel my pulse anymore. And I'm like, God, I've never seen this in a human being. I'm like, is this like a sign of improving health? Why is this happening to me? Well, as it turns out, it happens to all our subjects eventually as they do these studies. And so we get visible pulses. And so I now tell clients to come work with me. I say, hey, my report card is going to be based on, the effectiveness is you're going to see these things happen. You're going to get visible pulses. And so that's one of my strategies. I tell them, and it happens. And so I have a client group, and every so often a client say, yeah, I see the visible pulses are happening to me. So it's an exciting thing, and you should, as a human being, have visible pulses. All right, well, this is a picture of what happens when that blood flow improves and you stop the inflammation, that's going throughout your body as you improve your appearance. And one of the principal places it improves is in your face. So look at how much change I had happen in my face over this period of time in 10 years as I got rid of visceral fat. I go from this big inflamed puffy face here, age 48, to this much leaner looking face that I have today because of the influence of visceral fat being removed. Now, some people say, well, fat guy here and leaner guy there. No, the truth is I actually weigh more here, 178 pounds. So I'm actually 13 pounds heavier today than I was back then. It's just that I got rid of bad inflammatory tissue and I put on muscle. And so I got good beneficial tissue on my body, and it continues to improve my face. But look what happened to my body besides my face. This was me before. I had this curved spine. You see this curved caricature here? Older people, eventually develop a sagging kind of a terrible posture, and they walk around like this. I see them all the time. You do too. Go through a shopping mall or to churches where I see a lot of older people. But what you want is a nice straight posture up and down, like an 18, 20-year-old, like you formerly had. And what's happening is that visceral fat is going into your muscles throughout your back to include, your skeletal muscles, and your erector spinae muscles are getting infused with inflammatory fat, and they can't comply with the name of their muscle. Keep the spine erect. Erector spinae muscles keep the spine erect. Those muscles are inflamed. They don't perform as well. So you get this, sagging back. Well, look what happened to me. My posture improved dramatically. And young people can't understand it. They see I'm still a lieutenant colonel in the Army National Guard. They think, oh, sir, you're just slouching. No, you're going to be doing that slouching when you're 60, 70 years old too, because your muscles are going to fall apart. That's not volitional. These little old ladies and little old men bent over like this, they can't just stand up straight. They've lost that capability. And you will too, unless you get rid of this visceral fat. So I got my capability back by getting rid of that visceral fat. Then notice what else happened. I got dude arms. So I go from soft, puffy arms to now nice big muscles, definition, and check out the blood flow. Look at those veins. How much better my cardiovascular system became, through opening up, getting rid of that visceral fat and inflammatory effect throughout my arteries and veins. I did much better. And look at the shape of my head. I don't know how that happened, but the shape of my head improved. Everything improves as you get rid of visceral fat. So I try to share those changes. And I didn't take that picture there because I thought I was going to change. I just happened to take that picture because I was trying to track, my muscularity and stuff. I didn't know 10 years later, it was actually about 6 or 7 years later, I took a picture. It's like, dear God, was I that bad looking before? So, I learned about these things, how much the body changes with respect to losing visceral fat. We figured it out over time. We didn't go into this knowing. This is all from science research that we learn these things. So that's a really important biomarker. And then real quick, my hairs grew considerably. On this particular photograph here, you can see I got a hairy abdomen. My abdomen there was not very hairy, but my hair got much hairier on my body and my legs. About 300% increase in my hair and my legs from the better blood flow, the better tissue. The hair follicles doing much better. Here's a guy filled with visceral fat. Does my protocol to get rid of visceral fat. In 3 months, he loses all that visceral fat in that short period of time. Very healthy guy. But look at his scan. So filled with visceral fat here, and then 3 months later, it's only 3 months time period, he loses all that visceral fat and loses all his heart fat too. So all that heart fat, again, associated with visceral fat, and a dramatic reduction in just 3 months period of time. And then let me ask you a question, George. How long is the time period between this phase and this phase to improve that much? How long do you think it took?
Well, knowing the results you've shared with our audience to this point, I'd say 3 months.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty common answer. The truth is, it was only 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah, 3 days. So what this guy did was, now the average person who's filled with visceral fat, if they do what this guy did in 3 days, will not have this kind of change. I looked at these two photographs more than any other photographs that I have in my collection. And what this guy did was, for 6 months before, he lost all his visceral fat. So he had no visceral fat right here. And then 3 days later, what he did in between there, he fasted. He didn't eat any calories for 3 days. But again, the average person who's filled with visceral fat, who fasts for 3 days, is not going to get that kind of a change. The difference is a 17-year-old that doesn't have visceral fat, who fasts for 3 days, will get that. And what's happening is a human without visceral fat responds better to intervention than a human filled with visceral fat. So if you're wondering, you're 50, 60 years old, and you're going down, you're working out, and you're not putting on muscle like you used to, it's because you got visceral fat. And I could take you with a 17-year-old and have you do the exact same workout as the 17-year-old, same workout, same weights, same sets. And I'll walk up to that 17-year-old and I will put all this muscle on him in 6 months, basically reward him for the same work that you did, and you get buckus. You may not even put on any muscle for doing the exact same thing. And so what I'm here to tell you is your visceral fat is a con artist. It's ripping you off. It impedes the benefit of that stimulus from having a response, a beneficial response in your body. It's the #1 impeder of work. It's like you go out and do the same job as a young, healthy person, and the young, healthy person gets paid, and you get buckus, or you get a teeny tiny bit. So if you're listening today, that's why you're getting ripped off. It's not that you're older. And so I'll show you an example of that who's not getting ripped off. Check me out. Can you, oh, I got to blow this up a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. There you go.
Okay. So here I am, age 55. Here I am, age 59. And look how much muscle I put on. No testosterone, no hormones, no steroids, no performance enhancing. I got that much muscle increase from basically exercising about once every other day for about 15, 20 minutes. Now, I've gone on Twitter and I said, anybody, whatever they do, show me that kind of muscle gain that was done all naturally in a 55-year-old to 59-year-old in those five years like that, in that time period. Nobody could do it. And so what's happening is this 55-year-old has no visceral fat. So now when I lift, I get the results more like a younger person. And so you want to move ahead. You want to start living better. Get rid of your visceral fat, and then you'll start having this kind of response. When you do a sauna, you do a cold plunge, when you sprint, when you lift weights, when you do these kind of beneficial hormetic experiences, visceral fat is no longer there to rip you off and stop you from getting your payment. Now you can equalize that and go back to basically a more youthful condition. You know, no, you're not ever going to look 16 again, but you can be healthy where you can start getting gains again and become healthier for the rest of your life. So I like to challenge my people, you know, my clients, to grow better, not grow older. And you grow better by getting rid of visceral fat and then doing sensible things. So that's really it. Those are my slides I like to go through.
Well, it's excellent. And I didn't interrupt you for one reason. I was too interested in what you had to say. If you have a lot of visceral fat, you probably have a short attention span too, so you may not want to watch this full interview. But the point being, I'm jesting a bit, but the point is, what Dr. Amara is saying is so vital, because whether you believe it all 100%, 50 or 25, we're falling apart as a nation and as a world by our dietary habits and our lifestyle. So I'm going to unpack this a little bit now, and I'm not going to be long with it, but I'm going to unpack it so that the person watching this gets some of the generalities that you need to do, which we've already heard, but to recap it, to give yourself this lifestyle and to get rid of this visceral fat. And don't think because you have subcutaneous fat that's out to here that you're doing well as well, because you don't want that, as he said before. But let's unpack it. First of all, let's talk about getting rid of processed foods. When you talk to most people, they're going to be in shock. You mean I can't have pizza anymore? I can't go to the market and buy carbohydrates. They're in a box and have so many ingredients that I can't even identify what they are. I have to get rid of all that?
Yeah, that's why I tell people to do it. If they continue to eat that processed foods, it's like you're making a negative contribution to your health bank account. I mean, you're taking money out instead of building your health, you're hurting yourself. And you say, well, you know, in the end, if I do mostly good and just a little bit of bad, here's the problem I noticed with people with that kind of mentality, if they have cheat days or something, is they end up with a way worse outcome than for people that consistently eat healthy and eliminate those processed foods. And so one of the interplays, or what's responsible for that bad outcome, is the microbiome, which is these collection of microbes inside of your gut. So, you know, you want a better collection of healthy microbes and a smaller amount of bad ones. And when you feed bad food like this carbohydrates, pizza, pasta, rice, crackers, beer, cookies, all that kind of crap, you're contributing to bad microbes that continue to grow and accelerate disease in your body. So feed, the beneficial microbes, good things like healthy meats and healthy fats, healthy proteins, that will change your constellation. So I tell people, no cheating. There's no such thing as a cheat day. You got to stop harming your body. It's the enlightened individual that recognizes that their single most valuable physical asset that you can touch is your body, not your house, not your car, not your bank account, not your coin collection or anything else, your bars of gold. It's your body. And do not feed it crappy food that's going to deteriorate that. Once you get that your body is your most important thing and that nothing else is going to influence the amount you're either going to enjoy or suffer circumstances for the rest of your life in the future, then what the state of your body is, then you can start making enlightened decisions about what you're going to put into your body. You're no longer going to be putting that crappy food in there.
And you basically eat nothing but grass-fed meats. I assume you eat the wild-caught fish, but I could be wrong about that.
No,
and fermented vegetables as a garnish, pretty much.
Yep, that's the way I eat. So I eat the healthiest meat it can possibly get. The only species of predators that roam the earth that are capable of selecting what the healthiest animals are is Homo sapiens. So we can select Native Americans writing about hunting in the past would select the healthiest buffalo in the herd. They wouldn't shoot the older one, the young calf. They hunted the very best because it had the best meat and, very interesting, the healthiest microbes. Now, the Native Americans didn't know it. They just called it special powers that were in the animal skins. And they recognized those special powers because the healthier animal had special powers that made them more healthy when they wore that animal skin and they caught it. And it was the collection of microbes in that skin. So I eat today fermented foods, trying to build a healthy collection of microbes inside my gut, not just on my skin. And so inside my gut, I try to get as many good stuff in there, like fermented vegetables and fermented fruit. We just reviewed a study that came out 3 days ago that showed fruit, when it's fermented, there's a molecule in there called polyphenols, and polyphenols are difficult to absorb. They're antioxidants that help reduce disease, but they're hard to absorb by humans. But if you ferment the fruit, then those polyphenols, those compounds, become glycosylated in a manner where the capacity to absorb them and utilize them is significantly enhanced, way better. So Big Pharma is now looking for ways to do that in a chemical reaction and create that compound and sell it as a pill. But you can start today getting the benefits of that by fermenting fruits. I don't eat fruit in non-fermented form because it's just basically sugar in the fruits today. It's just, they're all hybridized, corporatized fruit that causes more disease and harm, in my opinion. So I eat fermented fruits and vegetables, and I also eat fermented animal products like dairy. So I consume, blue cheeses, fermented cheeses, plain unsweetened yogurts, plain unsweetened kefir, K-E-F-I-R, which is a wonderful fermented dairy product that's been around thousands of years.
Yeah, and I won't scare the audience with the formula you told me about the other day with the kvass and the kefir, but eventually, I don't think they'd gravitate towards that right away. But I should tell anyone that's watching this, you might turn this off, excuse me, and say, I could never do this. But I can tell you from a personal point of view, you can do it because I've done it. I've done the fasting for 5 days, the intermittent fasting, and I wouldn't even call it that, for 3 days at a time, and cutting carbohydrates out of the diet. You don't have to do it all at once. You have to do it in a sequential manner and get used to it for most people. But if you keep eating the way the standard American diet prescribes, which is sad, you're going to have the visceral fat that Dr. Omer is talking about, and you're going to not only cut your life short, but more importantly, the quality of your life. And you're not going to be his age, which is now 60, correct?
Correct.
And my age, which is 70. So I got a few years on you, and have vibrancy and feel great. Now I'm going to unpack something else. You talked about sprinting. So I know you're saying don't go out there and you haven't sprinted in 30 years and try to sprint. But for those that are just really in horrific shape, can they walk fast and get the same benefit? Probably not. Can they begin to introduce some other kind of exercise that would almost simulate sprinting? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get it a lot through my social media presence I do. So I recommend for people in that kind of situation, if they can't sprint and they got too much visceral fat and they're older and don't want to get that injury, sprint swim. So get in a swimming pool and sprint super fast in a swimming pool swimming. And you can sprint walk, kind of sprint run even in a swimming pool against resistance in that water. That's a beneficial substitute. And then sprint cycling on a stationary bike where the resistance is dialed up on that stationary bike, and you can sprint on that stationary bike. And people are able to do that with less exposure to injury until they get more healthy. But it's not a true substitute for sprinting. There is no true substitute for sprinting. Once you get healthy enough, and very often people have stopped running when they hit their 40s or 50s because they have so much joint pain. They're able to pick it back up eventually as they get rid of that visceral fat, because sprinting, even though you have that disease in there, sprinting doesn't cause as much damage as, because it's a short sprint, as, a 20-minute or 30-minute jog. Some people out there running, like I used to, 75 to 90 minutes every single day I was doing as a distance runner. And I was causing an enormous amount of joint pain. And I used to limp. My God, I had a limp in my jog. I was a mess. All my joints were inflamed. But I thought, my God, if I give up running, I'm really going to be a fat guy. And so I keep going and running when I was fat, and notwithstanding my joints were so bad. But yet today, not a bit of joint pain. I run up my steps at the age of 60. It's weird. It's not like, oh, I'm going to sprint again. I'm going to be at this house. No, literally, honest to God, I can't just walk up. I have this compulsion to sprint up. And, I'm like, God, this is how I felt when I was like 8 and 10 years old. You watch your kids, grandkids, they run up there, not because they're, they can't help it, like puppies running around. This is what happens to an adult who gets rid of visceral fat. They start having this much more vigorous lifestyle. So it will happen to you. Try some of these substitutes if you can't sprint. But nothing's a true replacement of sprinting.
So let me ask you, when you sprint, if you do it as a physical activity every other day.
Whoops. Refresh.
Freezing a bit here. Let's see what we got. See if we can get you back. Oh, we got you back. Let's see. Can we hear you? Can't hear you now. No.
Can't hear you. Can you hear me? Oh, now I hear you. Okay.
So we have a little glitch there. We can always cut that out. But the point being, every other day, every day you sprint, I don't know how much, 40 yards, 50 yards, 20 yards. What do you do? And does it really matter, or are you just trying to get your heart rate up and do it in a few bursts? How often do you do it?
So I tell people first, I've got a couple videos on sprinting in my YouTube channel. You just go to Dr. Sean O'Mara on YouTube and watch those videos. There's a lot of tips, and I get into that and many other aspects. So that's a good place. But the short answer is nature likes variety, so I mix it up. So sometimes I just do one sprint every other day. Sometimes I'll do 10 sprints. I've done sometimes 20 sprints in a day, and then the duration of them kind of changes too. It's typically right around 8 to 12 seconds. I try to do is my sweet spot, but and that's after I got up to accelerating slowly up to my maximum speed. Then I hold it for 8 to 12 seconds. But sometimes I'll do it shorter. Just do a 3-second sprint, a 6-second sprint, or I'll do a longer, maybe a 20, 30 or 20 to 30 second sprint. And, probably once a year, I'll do I'll do a 60-second sprint, or once a quarter rather, 4 times a year. I'll do a 60, 1 minute full on sprint. But mostly it's the 100-meter sprint that I try to do over about 8 to 12 seconds.
So for those watching, and they're probably very upset with you and say, well, no, I'm not going to give up my long distance running. What you're saying is, from the MRIs and everything you've seen, we're not talking about joint pain and destruction. We're talking about visceral fat that will accumulate due to that type of running. Yeah,
I tell them, go get an MRI scan if they're doing distance running and see what's inside of them, see what's happening. Very often, in fact, I don't think I saw a single distance runner that ever came to me that didn't have an elevated amount of visceral fat inside of them. And those individuals always would stop running when they saw that, and they begin reducing their visceral fat. So, I'm not going to say that you absolutely have to, but if you got visceral fat and it's accumulating, I think you need to get rid of that, stop that distance running. And it's sort of like trying an elimination diet. If things aren't going well because you got visceral fat inside, time to give up, processed foods, time to give up distance running, and see how you do. And then down the road, try introducing again, see if it causes visceral fat to come back. I think it probably will, but you got to know. We talked earlier in the show about all these studies that are out there. The only real study that matters ultimately is the study of one, n=1, where the study is you. And so the MRI best allows you to see what's going on from the inside out, and helps you make those informed decisions. And I don't know how you give up something like I did, distance running, without doing that MRI. It's just, I was addicted to running, and it's a very hard thing. So I understand for, your followers who are listening today and they're challenged about the notion of this distance running being bad for you. It's you really want to see what's going on inside your body, not what happens to the 7.9 billion other people out there. Your body is the one that matters.
One more thing, not everyone can go out and get an MRI, because your doctor's not going to typically prescribe an MRI and say, oh, it's a good idea, go get one of your abdomen. So what are your thoughts? What do you do?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. But everybody can go get one if they pay for it themselves. Your healthcare system, insurance company will never pay for it. And so, see, they're the cheapest now I'm aware of is down in Florida. A client of mine can get his for $300. So you get an MRI, cash pay $300. Tell your doctor, I want to pay for it out of pocket, my own money. I don't want to go through insurance. And then he or she has no reason to argue with you for a scan that's going to help you understand visceral fat, particularly if they don't know anything about it. You say, all right, if you want to order visceral scan for me to do visceral fat, just tell me as much as you know about visceral fat and why I shouldn't be scanning it. and he or she won't know anything about it. And then they say, why are you telling me I can't scan when you don't even know anything about it? And oh, by the way, I'm paying for it. What's the harm? And so if they really want to order it at that under those circumstances, and you've been nice about it, time to get a new doctor. I mean, that doctor is just resistant and arrogant. So they can be expensive, though, depending on your local market. Up here in Minneapolis, you know, I've some cash pay MRIs are as high as $2,900. That's like 10 times the amount of money in Florida. So they're market driven. So typically there'll be right around $750. If you can get it for under $1,000, it's a good deal. You should do it. If you got to pay more than $1,000, shop around, find another place that you can go to in your state and get an MRI, or go to another state where you get them cheap. Just head to Florida, get them cheaper down there in South Florida. I think is a good place. And oddly enough, Los Angeles, they're only about $340 in one of the systems out there in Los Angeles. So yeah, you shop around. It's market driven.
If somebody wants to reach you because you consult with elite individuals worldwide who want to get healthy, who want to get rid of visceral fat and change their lives, how do we do that?
Yeah, so people are interested in doing that and working with me, which I'm getting crazy busy, but I look for people that are motivated, so that will help you. If you're really motivated, is you can reach me through my website, www.drseanomara.com, just drshawnamara.com. And I'm the same thing on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. I have a social media presence where I'm out there trying to promote, you know, make up for all the damage I caused, you know, patients in the past, treating them the wrong way and arrogantly thinking medicines were the only approach and the best approach to do. And now I'm doing my level best to just give it away for free to people online. But they get far better results if they come to me and get scanned and work with me one-on-one.
Well, I think you're an exceptional physician, and I think you have a great deal of candor and honesty. And whether anyone believes everything you say or nothing, the point being, you're willing to say that at one time, you not only did a great deal of harm to others, but you did harm to yourself. And you turn your lifestyle around and that of many, many others. And I know we didn't even touch the surface today, because you also get in a sauna, take cold showers, you do all these things for hermetic purposes. And we've talked about how there's the supplements you consume. But I think the main thing we derive today is know if you have visceral fat. If you know it, you need to find a way to get rid of it. If you want to get rid of it, get the processed foods out of your life. Start to discipline yourself to do that, as hard as it may be. And then from there, eat good, wholesome, grass-fed meats, wild-caught salmon and fish. Use garnishes of fermented vegetables and fruits. And just from there, sprint. And if you can't sprint, you got bad knees, as he said, get in a pool, try to accelerate your heart rate, but don't just assume because you're a certain age that you have to be decrepit, that you have to lose your vitality and your cognitive skills as well. So this doesn't have to happen. And I guess the thing that aggravates me more than anything is when I encounter people that say, well, I'm old. What do you expect? Well, just like Ageless Timeless says, what we expect is excellence.